The last shloka also ends with Sarva Dharman Parityajya, and the last line of that is Ma Shucha. Do not grieve. So if somebody has to summarize that what is the teaching of the Gita, in 2 words it is to keep smiling, to live a life of happiness, and do not grieve. So what is the approach of Gita to grief is what we will see today. Grief is an emotional state which we experience when there is a loss of something which is very dear to us or someone who is very dear to us. And it's a very natural state which everybody goes through. There is nobody in this world who doesn't go through grief. All of us go through grief at some point or the other. And the intensity of that grief depends on the intensity of the relationship with that thing or that person. More intense is the relationship, more intense will be the grief, the feeling of loss of that person or that thing. And grief can happen for many, many reasons. It can be even, it does not have to be only the most intense form of grief is when somebody near and dear passes away. So death is the most intense form of grief. Otherwise, a loss of, even loss of health, loss of certain financial condition, even changing a house, changing a location, many of that can create grief. And for different reasons. For some reasons, some people may feel grief. For some reasons, some people may not feel the grief. They may just feel a little bit of a loss. But grief is a situation where one is feeling that not only the sense of loss, but there is also a deep sense of disappointment, non-acceptance of it, or there is a shock, there is sadness. Many of these emotions, they come together for grief. And that grief can happen externally, there may be many reasons for it. But one of the main reasons why there is grief is because there is attachment. So if we see in the Gita, actually in the Gita, the first chapter when we see, there are 3 characters in that first chapter. Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana and Arjuna. Dhritarashtra is attached to his own son. So symbolism there is of being attached to people. Duryodhana is attached to power and position and pleasure. Arjuna is also attached to people, but he represents what we call as the sattvic attachments. He has the attachment towards his teacher and towards his grandfather. And even at the possibility of losing them creates grief in him. So Arjun's situation is that he has not actually fallen into grief because of real situation, but it is going to happen, it's inevitable. And lucky for him that he was able to get himself equipped before getting into that situation. In our life, it happens in the other way many times. That we go through the situation first, then we go through grief, and then we need ways and means to come out of it. So it is a very important life skill actually, to learn how to cope with grief. In fact, to learn how to cope with disappointment or even failure. Because not being able to cope with these, we may land in grief. In our life, we see generally that people are taught how to aspire for success, how to achieve success. But how to face disappointments, what should be my attitude towards a failure, and especially something that I love, if that is taken away from me, I am not taught how to respond to that. And that's why we find so much of depression happening, so much of substance abuse happening. People get into so many different things, even to the extent of committing suicide. So in the whole Mahabharata, if we see, there is one truth which comes out very, very strikingly and is very clear is if there is attachment in our life, there will be grief. There is nobody can avoid that. And attachment will bring sorrow. So if we analyze so many characters, Dronacharya was attached to his own son, Ashwatthama. Not only was attached to his son, he was attached to the ways in which he should be brought up comfortably. A genuine desire any parent will have to provide good facilities to the child. But certain things may not be affordable. The person must be able to convey that to the child and make the child understand and then grow. As one grows in life, things will change. But because he was not able to give milk to his own son, he changed from his Swadharma and he became a teacher of archery and warfare. If we see Karna, very attached to the sense of victimization that he had, that I was abandoned in the childhood, and again attached to his own friend. If we see Bhishma, he was attached to the ideal, that he gave a vow to his father that whoever is on the throne, I will be loyal to that person. So attachment could be towards people, attachment could be towards power, pleasure, attachment could be towards an idea, attachment could be towards one's own insecurity and feeling of victimization. And Yudhishthir was attached to a habit. Habit itself is an attachment. First time he lost, he should have stopped. Second time when they invited him, again he went. Could not control. So attachment, and in all these cases we find, however noble that person may have been, if there is attachment in the life of that person, it will lead to grief. So in overcoming grief, we have to understand the cause of that grief and then how to overcome that. Before we go into those details, let us see a few other aspects about grief. There are certain myths about grief. See, when I lose something or someone and I feel sad or I feel a shock, it is a very natural human response. But there are certain myths which are related to grief, which we should clear in our mind, because those myths, when they get cleared, then it becomes easy to handle grief. So myth number one is that the pain will go away faster if you ignore it. It doesn't work. The pain will not go away faster just by ignoring it. It will only remain there, unattended, and it may even keep increasing, compounding. It keeps becoming more intense because I am not facing it, I am running away from it. One has to face it. In psychology they say, if you can feel it, you can heal it. If I ignore it and I refuse to face it, it will not go away. Because we think that by time it will happen on its own. If I ignore it in time, it will go away. No. Only if I have faced it at that moment, in time, there's an opportunity for it to become weak and it goes away. Otherwise, it remains. So myth number one is, if I ignore it, it will go away. No, I must face it. Myth number two is, it is important to be strong in the face of the loss. This you can apply in any situation. I am talking in a general situation, whether it is a person or a position one has lost, or money one has lost, or reputation one has lost, anything, house, whatever. I have to be strong in the face of it. No doubt one has to be strong, but that does not mean that I do not show my emotion, or I do not make people aware that I am also pained, I am also feeling sad, I am also feeling a deep sense of disillusionment. I must go through it. And if I need to cry, there is no problem. Putting up a false show of strength is not required. Because all of us are human beings. And in fact, it is better if people around me see how I am expressing. they will also be able to express. And they also don't have to keep guessing that if this person is not feeling it, what is happening inside. There can be too many assumptions at that point in time. People may get confused. So myth number 2 is that if I have to show it, I show it. I don't have to appear strong. If naturally I can make myself strong, there is no problem about that. Myth number 3 is if you don't cry, it means you are not sorry about the loss. So the earlier myth was that if I cry, I am not strong. And there is a lot of these wrong notions. In Hindi there is one saying, मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता. क्यों नहीं होता भाई? होता ही है. If the heart is there, it will happen. These are stereotypes, unnecessary, wrong notions in the head. It will pain. So if you feel like crying, cry. If you feel disappointed, you feel disappointed. You show it, there is no issue. So if one myth is that to cry is to be weak. The other myth is that if I don't cry, then only I'm not showing the loss. If I am not crying, it means that I am not feeling the loss. Crying is not the only way to show the loss. There is sadness, there is resentment, there is so many other disappointing feelings which are there in the heart, which may not express as crying. Many times it happens that when there is a prayer meeting or a Shok Sabha which is being organized, there is a false show of crying which happens. And not only that, is an exaggerated show of crying. Beating the heart and this and that. And see, the person who is going through it feels like doing it, that's a different point. But so many times other people are doing it because it is supposed to be done. That is not required. So if I am not crying, doesn't mean that I am not feeling the loss. That's myth number 3. Myth number 4 is that grief takes a long time to go. It depends on each one's coping mechanism. Some people may get over it soon. They learn to accept it. And the faster they learn to accept it, the better they will be able to overcome it. And there are some people who will take time. And there are some people who will take a long period of time, maybe a year or 2 or even more. Some people get over it in a few days, some people in just a few hours. So it depends on each one's coping mechanism, that how we overcome that grief. There are a few other aspects which happen while there is grief. Initially, there can be a mode of denial, where I just don't accept. How could this happen to me? One can't accept. So in psychology, they have put down these as some stages also. Not necessarily that everybody will go through this in stages, in the same stages as they have pointed out. They can go through it in any combination, in any how. So first stage they say generally is denial. And it is a natural response in everybody because we don't expect. In certain cases there is an expectation, that it's an expected thing. Where somebody has been suffering for a long time, there is a prolonged illness and one knows that the time is less, or this is going to happen. Or one knows that this recession is happening, it's inevitable that my job will be, I will be sent away from my job. Some places it is known. But in many cases it is not known because life is so unpredictable, so unexpected. And so we find that there is a denial that this can't happen to me. Or I don't deserve this. Why did this happen to me? So now there are two problems. One is the actual situation and other is my non-acceptance. That why this happened to me. That can also lead to the second stage, which is anger. That I may become very angry from within. I may even become violent externally. I may start becoming rude in my talking, expressions. Because I did not expect this to happen. Especially in case of betrayal. Somebody betrays, then there is a deep sorrow. Betrayal may be in relationships, or it may be even in partnership, in business, in anything. When there is a betrayal, then there is a deep sense of sorrow, and there is anger, and there is resentment, and I did not expect this to happen. So there can be anger at sometimes, and in that anger one will find somebody or the other to blame, and there may be valid reasons externally to blame that person. There can also be, if this goes on, it can also be depression. One can land in a deep depression where one feels hopeless. One feels even worthless. Basically, when that grief happens, I feel worthless many times. That's how that grief becomes depression. I feel unworthy. I feel life is not worth living. I feel everything is gone from my life. What was most dearest to me has been taken away. There's nothing to look forward to. One becomes hopeless, helpless, depressed. And there can be finally even acceptance. That fine, this has happened. One may go through all this and finally come to acceptance. One may come to acceptance soon, depending on what is one's mental state, how strong is a person. So there could be denial, there could be anger, there could be depression, there could be acceptance. One can go through these in stages also, one can go through this depending on what is one's mindset. These need not be steps one leading to the other. But a person does go through. And what are these symptoms of this grief? How do I distinguish between a normal sorrow and a grief? So some of the symptoms are there is shock and disbelief. And sometimes there is guilt along with that. That if I know that I should have done something which I did not do, then there will be guilt. If I could have done something to help somebody or prevent somebody from going through the pain that they are going through, and for some reason I could not do it, then there is guilt. So there could be guilt, there could be shock and disbelief, there could be a lot of worries and fears that what will happen next. So I am not able to handle the present right now. So if recession happened, so many people committed suicide. They killed themselves, they killed their own family members because of debt they came into, and then worries and fears and anxiety, and in that moment one doesn't know how to handle that. Even there could be physical symptoms. It could be fatigue, it could be nausea, it could be weight loss, sudden weight loss, immunity loss, one falls sick. Many of these can happen. So the person who is going through grief, at the mental level, how strong is that grief, how intense is that grief, on that will depend how that person, what is the person going through. So in the Gita we find that Arjun also goes through in the first chapter. Just at the possibility when he imagines, he goes through grief. That's why the whole first chapter actually is called Arjun Vishad Yoga. Vishad is grief. The grief of Arjuna. See, there are certain factors which hinder healing of grief. And we should know that before we go into the way to overcome grief. What are the factors that hinder this healing of grief? Most important factor is escaping. I should not escape from grief. And there are different ways to escape. There are some people who think that if I keep working and I take my mind away, then I will overcome grief. No. It may help for some time to divert my mind. I am focusing on work. But grief is a deep emotion that one is going through, which one has to face. So somebody escapes through work. Somebody escapes by going into drugs, alcohol. And it is so sad that in society that is one way in which a lot of people try to cope with grief. And that is how that is shown also very commonly. That if somebody has a deep disappointment, one just takes to alcohol. As though that is one normal accepted way of getting over grief. And the more the grief is, the more I have justification to drink and forget myself and whatnot. It's just an escape, nothing else it does. More than that, overcoming grief, it makes my life more miserable. So it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be any of these, it could be work, it could be complete isolation, where I don't meet anybody, nor do I face that emotion by myself, nor do I let it out and meet people. I just withdraw from everything. There are different ways of escaping. So one is the person escapes. That escapism will definitely hinder overcoming grief. Second also is one tries to reduce the intensity of the grief. One should not do that. If the intensity is very strong, let it come. It will go away. If I say, no, I can't feel this much, I just want to feel very less, how much I am able to accept, that much only I am able to express. Rest of it is still there. So minimizing the feelings or reducing the intensity of the grief and avoiding the rest of it is another way of escape. That again hinders. Third is a compulsive behavior. I compel myself to smile, to do something which makes people feel that I am not happy, I am not sad, and I am pushing myself. Some of these will hinder. Sleep. Sleep can definitely help in some ways, but some people keep sleeping. It won't work. So different people take different routes of escape, and all these different escape routes which are there, they will not allow the grief to heal. It will remain. It may even increase. So how to handle this grief? In the first chapter, Duryodhan, Dhritarashtra and Arjuna. You see, Dhritarashtra felt the grief. He knew that what he has done he has not done his duty as a king. What he has done is not appropriate. And so we find that he feels so regretful. He feels so guilty. His children, he is going to be actually responsible for the death of his own children. So he asks Sanjay that what happened in the battlefield. In the Mahabharata, if you read, it is said that when Bhishmacharya fell on the 10th day, that is when he asked, Dhritarashtra asked Sanjay that what happened. Till then he did not ask. So he got an outlet. Arjun also had a problem, he got an outlet. He went to Sri Krishna. Duryodhana had a problem. He did not have grief in his heart, but he had the stress, he had that anxiety, he was feeling very nervous. He also went to Dronacharya, but he did not confess in front of Dronacharya that this is what I am feeling. So in psychology they would say that when there is a grief, not only that one should face it by oneself, one should first and foremost take a support, so that that grief gets vented out. That support could be a person, somebody who is close to you. You can vent out in front of that person. That support could be any other means. The support can also be an expression of grief, could be where you write. It could be our source of strength. So it could be that somebody believes in the Lord, so one anchors in the Lord, one expresses in front of the Lord. Support could be any friend, group, and if required, one can even take support of a therapist. So if I can face it by myself, I should face it definitely. But a support system will definitely help. And that support system should be such that the person is not giving me solutions till I don't went out completely. That's why if you see in the first chapter, very beautiful, Shri Krishna doesn't do anything. He just listens. Because when somebody is in grief, they don't want solutions immediately. They want somebody to listen. They want somebody to make them feel that what they are going through is fine, is normal. And make them feel that I am with you. That's what they need. Off the top of the head, one may keep giving some solutions. It will worsen the situation of that person because that person will feel unaccepted. So in the whole first chapter, we find that the Lord doesn't speak anything. He keeps listening. And this listening, in normal relationship, only listening is a big issue. Nobody listens. So if there is a grief or there is a sorrow, all the more we should be very sensitive to listen. So we find that in case of Dhritarashtra and Arjun, both of them, Sanjaya and Shri Krishna, they listen. And they don't give solutions immediately. They don't make that person feel any lesser because that person is going through that situation. They listen. I am told that in America, one of the highest paid jobs is the job of a psychiatrist. Why? Because they will listen. And I still wonder, how does a psychiatrist keep his or her own sanity? Continuously they keep listening to one after the other. How do they maintain their balance? Very difficult. So one thing is that we need a support, and that support we should choose such a person who is empathetic to us, who does not give solutions, rattle off, fat. Because solutions many times people know. They just want to feel accepted that what they are going through is valid. They need a validation. So Shri Krishna doesn't give any solution to Arjun. He listens to him. And Arjun pours out completely. With all his justification and everything he pours out. Second thing Shri Krishna does is he does not just keep saying yes to whatever Arjun is feeling. He listens quietly. But where Arjun has gone wrong, he doesn't support Arjun in a wrong way there. He treats the problem at a very different level. So he just doesn't give a solution to Arjun at a superficial level. He makes Arjun take responsibility. So in the second chapter we find that when Arjun, if you see the end of the first chapter and the beginning of the second chapter, that's the description of Arjun who is in the sthiti of Vishad. The last verse of the first chapter says that Eva Muktva Arjunaha Sankhye Rathopastha Upavishat Visrujya Sasharam Chapam Shoka Samvigna Manasa. So he throws away his bow and arrow. He gets down from the chariot and he comes down and sits at the feet of Shri Krishna and completely resigned. He says, I don't want to do my duty. I don't want to fight. And Shoka Samvigna Manasa. He is completely broken down in his personality. Intellectually, he is absolutely confused about his duty. Emotionally, completely overwhelmed about the emotion that he is feeling for his own near and dear ones. At the physical level, he has become completely debilitated. He cannot even stand. His bow has fallen. He has thrown away his arrows and everything, and totally dejected. He is sitting there. To that Arjun, when he has finished saying everything, Bhagavan did not say, Arjun, what you are feeling is fine. Because in case of Arjun, it was a misplaced compassion. He was feeling misplaced compassion. He was feeling compassion for those who are on the adharmic side. And so the person has to know whether that grief has a genuine basis or it is misplaced. When it is a genuine case, then one handles it very sensitively. When if it is misplaced, if the person is able, what Sri Krishna did is he whipped him out of it. He said, Shudram Hridaya Daurbalyam Jaktva Utishta Parantapa. O Arjun, get up from this state of inertia. It is your weakness of heart that you are feeling all this. Because the circumstance is the same for everybody. Yudhishthir, Bhim, Duryodhan, Dhritarashtra, for everybody the circumstance is the same. But Arjuna has collapsed. Because his attachments overwhelmed him. So not only he whipped him out of it, he made him realize that the problem that you have is the attachment because of which you are going through this entire sorrow. So when there is a grief in our mind, one is to vent out, to empty ourselves where we seek a support. Second is also to identify the cause for the grief. Because I have to remove that cause. It's an attachment which is there in my heart. It may not be very easy to do that. But if I don't do that, acceptance will not happen easily. Because when I am attached to something and that thing is taken away, I cannot accept. Because my feeling is that without that person or that thing, I am incomplete. And because of that, I have sorrow now. So when there is attachment in our life, there will be two things, fear and sorrow. And third one is anger. If I don't get what I want, or if there is a possibility of any obstacle coming between me and what I want, or a possibility of my dear and near thing or person being taken away, there will be anger. And there will be fear of losing. And when the actual loss happens, there will be shoka, there will be sorrow. So bhaya, krodha and shoka, they all come because of raga, they come because of attachment. So in the Gita we find that Sri Krishna actually goes to the cause of the grief and makes Arjun get over that cause. So attachment is the cause of grief. You see, so many people, they lose so many things every day. So many near and dear ones or so many other people, they pass away. But we don't feel sorrow at that time because there is no sense of attachment or even belonging. So where there is attachment, there will be sorrow. And I always say that attachment and sorrow are directly proportional to each other. The greater the attachment, greater will be the sorrow. Lesser the attachment, lesser will be the sorrow. And if I want no sorrow in my life, there should be no attachment in my life. So we will see a small clip of Gurudev where he speaks about this attachment. This is from the second chapter of the Gita, which is verse number 48.
Renounce all your attachment. In perfect detachment, act on. This 100 times you may read, but we never pause to understand what it is. Attachment is very well known to every one of you. Every one of us have got some attachment or the other. But the attachment of each individual may be different from each other. You are attached to the mother, another is attached to the father, another is attached to the wife, another is attached to the children. Some are attached to their profession, some are attached to power, some are attached to money, wealth. Swamiji, you have never told what my attachment is. I am not attached to all these things. Then in that case you are attached to your dog. That is right. I am attached to my dog. Without some attachment you cannot live. If any one of you say that, Swamiji, I have no attachments, all that I can tell you is, lie down there, after the lectures we will attend to your funeral. Why? When there is no attachment, you are dead. You have no business to remain in this world. Attachment everyone has got. So I am not asking you anything that you don't know. What is God and all that, I am not asking. Every one of you think of your attachment. Whatever be that attachment. And try to verbalize what do you mean by attachment. I am attached to my children. Good. I am attached to my house, my furniture, my jewelry, my saris. I am attached to any stupid thing, a cat, a rat. And the latest in America is my pet rock. That is the latest. Attached to pet rock. Okay. Every one of you have got attachments. Analyze, what do you mean by attachment? Attachment is a feeling. Luckily it is not physical. If physically you and I are attached to things, you can't move about. Because I am attached to my wife and my children and my property and my factory, my business or my house. How can you move? Attached. It's not physical. It's the mental. Analyze. What do you mean by in the mind an attachment? A mere thought. A stream of thought by which we tie ourselves to things and beings in the world outside. So when I say that I am attached to mother or father, whatever it is, it means that I am complete only with that being or thing, minus that being or thing, I am the less for it. I'm not complete in myself. I plus my mother, life is wonderful. Minus my mother, I don't know what to do. I and my wife, beautiful life. Minus my wife, I have no hope of getting another wife. Silly feeling, just a feeling. Thing is called attachment. So attachment is a thought bondage, which means, that thought bondage, what is it? It includes I plus I want. Think again and again before taking down your notes. Think! I plus I want. This feeling towards anything in the world or any being in the world is called attachment. That attachment can be to a dog or a cat or a rat. It can be to your guru or to your father or your mother. It can be to power or money or wealth. Meaning, I and plus I want that money, then only I am complete. Gone, money gone, I am gone. This kind of a stupid feeling in your mind is called attachment. It is with this attachment that you are tied down from all sides. Attachment is not with one thing. A million things you are attached. Each one is only a stupid feeling that I am not complete and I shall feel complete only with these things A, B, C, D up to Z. This sense of attachment to be liquidated. Make yourself free from these attachments in the world outside. Eh? This is all that the teacher says. Sangham tektva, giving up all your attachments, all your dependency upon the world outside for your survival, for your completeness. Discover your own completeness and fullness.
So that attachment is the root cause of the grief. So dependency, as much as it is there, attachment as much as it is there, to that much extent there will be grief in our life. In Arjun's case, at least he was fortunate enough that he could get equipped earlier to handle his attachment, and then he entered into the war, and that made him, he would definitely have felt the pain of killing his own grandfather and other people. But at least that kept him focused. He did not sway away from his duty, and the knowledge that was given to him made him cope with the sorrow much more strongly. And so we will see here that if attachment is the main cause of our grief, acceptance is one main solution to grief of what has already happened. And detachment is a solution for grief which may come in future. So we will see about these two aspects. That for something which has already happened, what is the solution? I have already lost a job, I have already lost some person, or my pet has passed away. So many things can happen. Now for what has already happened, I am going through some grief. If there is something I can do for it, I should do. If there is a job which is lost, I need to do something to go get another job, I must do that. But in certain cases there is nothing possible. Somebody has passed away, you can't do anything. Somebody has betrayed and gone, now what will you do? So if those situations are there where nothing else is possible, thing is to accept. The solution is to accept. Now how quickly can I come to acceptance that fine, this has happened to me. To that extent I will come out of that grief. So what are the methods to accept now? One aspect is where we understand that whatever happens to me happens only because of my own karma. Nobody can get anything that person doesn't deserve. And what I deserve, I cannot escape from that. So my karma which I have done in the past, some effect of that I am facing. That doesn't mean I am a bad person. Many people think that if I am facing something difficult or I have gone through some loss, etc., it is some past sin that I have done. So I am a bad person, I am a sinner, and then I am going through this. No, it need not be. In that earlier time I have done something in my ignorance, not knowing the consequence. And I am facing the result of it. Doesn't mean I am a bad person. I don't have to brand myself as a sinner. In our culture we never brand. Nobody is a sinner. All of us are divine. The same divinity is there in everybody. So I must know that very clearly that if karma I have done in the past, I am facing the consequence. I don't have to judge myself whether I am a good person or a bad person because of the consequence that I am facing. Some people are born especially challenged. The attitude towards some of them is people think that person must have done some sin in the past, so he is born in a physical challenge. It could be even a biological process, it could be an evolution process. So the reason why somebody goes through some things, there may be an effect in the cause in the past, which is what we call as karma. If there is an effect, therefore should be a cause. I may not know what is the cause right now. And nor do I need to assume and brand myself as good or bad because of that. So if something has come to me, how soon can I accept that yes, this has come? If I believe in law of cause and effect, if I believe in karma, then I should learn to face that fact that this has come to me because of my karma. Nobody can prevent the karmic effect from coming. Nobody can escape karma. We can escape judiciary, we can escape bureaucracy, we can escape the government, we can escape anything, CBI and whatever. But we can never escape karma. Everybody will have to face their karma. So how sanely, how dignified way can I meet this challenge? That okay, this has come, let me accept. So the way of karma is one. And this becomes easy for us when we understand to maintain this standpoint consistently. When good things also happen, I must know that it has happened because of my karma. And I accept it. There is no difficulty in accepting there. That's why we don't even think. Kabir Das ji, that's why he said so beautifully, दुख में सुमिरन सब करे, सुख में करे नको. जो सुख में सुमिरन करे तो दुख काहे को हो. If I remember even at the good times that this has come because of some karma, then I will remember it even at the difficult times. That this has come because of some karma, let me accept. And then I get over it. So many people who have believed in that no matter what has come to me, I have the free will right now to choose how to face that. They have been able to not only bounce back from that grief, but they have been also able to rise higher. Gurudev used to say that, we should be like that ping pong ball. A ping pong ball, with how much force that is thrown down, it bounces higher. The more the force, the more higher it bounces. So in one of our youth camps, we had given that as a prasad of the camp. At the end of the camp, it was a ping pong ball and it was written on that, bounce back. Because we are finding that, how mind is so weak. We are doing this Transforming Indians to Transform India. The statistics there, some of the statistics are very disturbing. They are reported statistics. That every 90 minutes, one teenager commits suicide in our country. Teenager. And that is reported. Unreported will be so many more. Because the mental strength is not there. For small things, I say I lose hope, give up. So, how to bounce back? When I understand that today I have a free will, then I am facing a grief right now, no doubt in that, but let me use this situation to gather my own courage and bounce back. For me to do that, I must have a higher purpose in life. There must be a goal in my life, there must be a higher purpose in my life which will focus my energies. Otherwise, one person, few things, and I just lose the entire focus of my life. In Arjun's situation, the higher purpose was to protect dharma. So holding on to that, Bhagavan told him, Tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsasi. O Arjun, fight because it's your duty to protect dharma and you will not incur sin. So don't worry about that. You have to put that higher purpose in front, that I am here for this. Lokmanya Tilak, very famous example. The example is that he was in the court and fighting a case, and he got the news. Somebody came and gave him a news that his wife passed away. He read in the sheet of paper that was given to him. He closed it, kept it, was quiet for a moment. He resumed the case. When it got over, the judge asked him that, what happened at the end of the whole thing. He said that, my wife passed away. So he said, how did you continue? He said, no doubt my wife passed away and I felt sad, so for a moment I was quiet, but my country needs me and I need to do this duty. So I continued. And he continued. So people who have that anchoring in something which is higher, they can handle this. That if there is certain grief which has come, how fast can I accept? To accept, I need to understand the law of karma works, that nothing happens in an unjust way. This question, why this to me, goes away when I understand the law of karma properly. So that denial mode, etc. will not happen to me. I may feel the shock, but this why me will not happen. And unnecessary denial and unnecessary anger and feeling that, God is partial and so many things we imagine, those will not happen if I believe just in law of cause and effect. I don't even need to believe in God. That's another way to deal with it, but right now we are on the karma path. So if I deal with it in a way that, okay, this has come, let me face this. And how dignified way can I face it? And not only that, can I use my free will right now For that there should be a higher purpose in my life. Then I can hold on to that. Not that the grief will not be there, but because I hold on to a higher purpose, I won't be devastated. I will not become purposeless. I will not completely get shattered. Imagine what greater difficult situation than consciously killing your own near and dear ones. Arjun was in that situation. Somebody whom you love so dearly, you have to kill. And this knowledge was that which gave him that strength that yes, I need to do my duty. So one is the way of karma, that this has come, it must have an effect cause in the past and I accept it, and today how I deal with it is completely my choice. That free will we have. And very few people actually use that free will. Somewhere I read a very nice statement. It was said, destiny is not in the lines of your hand, but in the grasp of your palm. That how do I use this present moment? That determines what will be my future. In great moments of adversity and difficulty, people have been able to bounce back because they use their purusharth. So one is the way of karma. Second is the way of devotion or bhakti, where we learn to accept with this faith that whatever is happening by the will of the Lord. And I trust the cosmic intelligence. I surrender to the Lord and learn to hold on to that Lord. So if there is devotion in my heart, and at such times, especially when there is a loss of a near and dear one, I must remember this very clearly, that the Lord, as much as the Lord is with me, the Lord is with the departed one also. And my holding on to the devotion will not only make me strong, will make the departed one also strong. Because I will be able to send my own thoughts of love and peace. So holding on to devotion is another great strength. If you believe in this higher power, if you believe in God, whatever is your understanding of that there is a Lord who is there with us at all times. In science they call it consciousness or reality. In Vedanta we call it as consciousness or the Lord, truth, whatever may be the understanding, any particular form also. But the Lord is there with me and I hold on to that Lord. Especially at those times of difficulty. In the Gita, Bhagavan says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. Having come to this world which is temporary, anityam, asukham, there is no real happiness here, it's temporary fleeting pleasure. Bhajasvamam, you remember me, remember that which is the eternal, that which is supreme. Holding on to that Lord, one can overcome that grief. Bhagavan is there with me. So many great devotees have been able to do that. Prahlad was one example of that. He never felt victimized. He never felt that my own father is trying to kill me, why this is happening to me, I have never done anything wrong in my past and still this is happening to me. None of those. Otherwise he could have lamented on and been in grief and wallowing in self-pity. But he said no, the Lord is there with me, the Lord protects, the Lord guides, and I hold on to that Lord. So that support system there is the Lord that I hold on. Even in the case of Arjun we find that is what happened. The Vishad of Arjun turned into Prasad. Why? Because he surrendered to the Lord. That, oh Lord, I am completely confused, I do not know what to do. Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava, prichhami tvam. I am asking you, dharma sammoda chetana. I don't know what is right and wrong, I don't know what to do. Yat shreyas syad nishchitam bruhitan. May you please tell me what is the best for me. Shishyas teham, I am your disciple. I surrender unto you. Shadhimam, please instruct me. So at moments of grief, I can open up my heart to the Lord that, oh Lord, please guide me, please be with me. May I hold on to you. Give me that strength to hold on to your feet. And devotion is a very, very great strength. If love, when it becomes attachment, is a cause of sorrow, that same love turned towards the Lord, devotion, becomes the means for getting out of that sorrow. So Gurudev used to tell us that falling in love is called love, but rising in love is called devotion. So devotion is another way. There is a small clip of Gurudev on that. You can just see that. Very beautiful clip on devotion, what he speaks.
Devotion means love. Devotion means love. Love means a kind of devotion. What is devotion? A kind of love. If both are the same, prema, love, bhakti, devotion. Why two words for the same thing? That is absurd. In no language you got two names of the meaning the same. There is some difference. What is the difference between love and devotion? Think. You all know what is love, isn't it? I love my dog. I love my chapel. I love my wife. You say these all the three in one sentence. There will be a great commotion in the family for the next 1 week. Isn't it? But the idea is right. I love my dog. You are right. Do you love the chapel? I go, I love the chapel. And wife? Yes, I love. Don't you think it's insulting? Okay. Nobody says that I am devoted to my dog. Except a few. No decent husband would say. No decent husband would say that I am devoted to my wife. I love my wife, right. But not devoted. But you are devoted to your parents. Devoted to your teacher. Devoted to art. Devoted to my profession. Okay? Devoted to my country. Devoted to that philosophy, political or philosophical. Devoted to the ideal, right. But I love my dog, I love my horse, I love my motorcycle, I love it. You don't say that I am devoted to my motorcycle. Think of the difference. What is the difference? The emotion remaining the same. Love and devotion. The emotion remaining the same. When that emotion of love is towards something lower, I call it love. And the same emotion, when it is towards something higher, we call it. Think. Don't accept, I told you. I think you are sitting down and accepting. Don't accept. When the emotion of devotion or love is for the lower, it is called L-O-V-E. I love this, I love that, I love chocolate also, I love blue color, I love blue color. Everything blah 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 blah. But devotion is only when the same emotion is lifted to an altar higher. Now, in all languages of the world, all of you when you are teenagers, you must have gone through one or two experiences of what you generally call all over the world. I fell in love. Anybody who has never fallen in love? Miserable man. You have missed something. At least now go and fall one. I fell in love. Is the definition in every language. What do you mean by fall in love? Ayo, Swamiji, till yesterday I was a carefree, happy, jolly good man. And yesterday evening in the temple I saw her. Then what happened? Fell. Is it not? Fell means what? You are not slip and fall. I have fallen in my poise, balance, inner happiness. I seem to have gone into confusion. I don't know now whether I will be able to marry her, whether my parents will allow me, how will I marry, but if I marry, now I'll have to look after her, and how will I look after her, where is the money for it, and I have no job at all, I am unemployed and unemployable. All the sorrows come to your mind. Then you say, I have fallen in love. Falling in love is called love, but rising in love is called devotion. When you become devoted to some ideal, you start developing your personality. Your little stature grows. To rise in love is called devotion. So when I have got a goal, a symbol there to symbolize my beloved Lord, and when I tune up my mind to Him in devotion, I cultivate or develop my faculties more and more if I am sincere.
So falling in love is called love and rising in love is called devotion. And when there is this devotion in the heart, not only one overcomes grief, but one becomes so strong that future, the possibility of grief also goes away completely. When one is anchored in that devotion. So that is an important aspect, that do I anchor in devotion? Do I anchor in the law of karma? And devotion is such a beautiful aspect that when there is devotion in life, there is fullness, there is completeness. People who are devotees, one of the definition of an atheist is one who cries, cribs and complains is an atheist. Why? Because if there is a Supreme Lord and you are having the belief that the Lord exists and the Lord is there, the Lord takes care of the whole world. And still if we crib, complain and cry, then our Shraddha is not there in that Lord. So in the cosmic intelligence, the Lord has sent this. I accept it as His prasad. However difficult it may be, I accept. In fact, a devotee is one. Our faith is tested during those times. Kunti actually in Bhagavad, if you see, went and prayed to Bhagavan that, oh Lord, I don't pray for happiness because when I am happy, I generally forget you. Let there be pain. I am not saying we should ask for pain, but the strength of the devotion is tested at those times. That can I fall back on the Lord saying that, oh Lord, I accept whatever you have sent. May be difficult for me, but give me the strength to face this. There is one type of a devotee who will say, oh Lord, this problem has come, please remove this for me. There is another type of Lord, the devotee who says, oh Lord, this situation has come, give me the strength to face this. Doesn't want to escape, wants to invoke that strength from within to face it. Okay, this has come now, let me face it. So either anchor in karma or anchor in bhakti, or third one is anchor in knowledge. What is the knowledge? One aspect of the knowledge is that even this will pass away. 4 words. That everything is temporary in this world. Whatever comes will go. Nothing is permanent. So however difficult the situation may be right now, it will pass. No doubt in that. And once I know that very clearly, I anchor myself in that I know that everything is temporary. This cannot last for long. Let it pass. I go through it with as much balance as I can. But keep telling myself, because many times in grief what happens is the mind plays the trick that it will appear unending. It will appear as though this is going to be very long and this is not going to end and my whole life is gone, and those kind of things the mind starts doing. Natural, anybody will feel that sometimes. And the intensity is so strong. I need to tell myself even this will pass away. This is one more situation in life. I agree that this is very difficult to do. Either of the three paths are very difficult to follow. But as we see, if we are equipped earlier and if we have learned this properly, if we have tried to anchor ourselves in good times in any of these, it will happen at the difficult times also. So one aspect of knowledge is to know clearly that even this will pass. Second aspect of knowledge in the Gita, the Lord says, is to learn to understand the laws of this universe. That which is born will die. Jatasya hi dhruvam mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya cha. That which is born will die and that which is dying will be born again. Tasmad apariharyete natvam shochitum arhasi. This inevitable fact of life is that everything is so momentary that birth will be followed by death. There is no escape from it. In fact, only one thing which is guaranteed in this world is death. It will happen. So I must be ready for my own death, for the death of other people, and death in Vedanta does not mean only death of the physical body. Death in Vedanta means change. Even physical death actually is only a change of our state. The body dies. The individual who was occupying the body doesn't die. That's why again in the Gita the Lord says, Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata. Tasmadeva viditvainam na anshochitum arhasi. You do not deserve to grieve, Arjun, because the Dehi, the indweller, is not going to die. So Bhagavan prepares him for the most intense form of grief, which is death. And he makes him aware that yes, this person right now in front of you, Bhishma, as Bhishma may cease to exist in the body, but the Jiva will continue ahead. And when karma demands, you will come together also. You may not remember exactly what was your connection in the past, but don't we feel in our own daily life, our vibes are matching. We instantly clicked. That is all karma only, what else? And the Jiva, two Jivas came forward, came together and suddenly they started relating. And suddenly they go away also. So close they were and suddenly gone. They look each other different directions. That is the play of karma. So it is going to happen that what is born will die, what is dying will be born again. And once I understand this very clearly, I equip myself that the indweller does not die. So in one of the aspects in our culture is that when the person departs, why do we have Antyeshti karma? Why do we have Shraddha karma? It is to handle the grief of the person who is left behind. One of the reasons is that when I chant those mantras, when I do those rituals, I may be weak enough, but I am given the strength of the scripture, I am given the strength of the knowledge, I am reminded again and again at that point in time. And also that it is a proactive way to deal with grief. Rather than sitting quietly and grieving and just doing nothing and devastating myself, I can do certain things for the departed soul because I am still connected to the departed soul through the mind. Only the body of the departed soul is gone. Whatever I do with the mind is going to reach the departed soul. And in fact, the more grief I have, the more pain they feel. Because they are in a subtle body form. They can experience that much more intensely than we because we are still identified with our gross body. And hence, the faster I come back to balance, the more loving thoughts I send to that person that no matter where you are, in whichever form you are, my love is there with you. I send you vibrations of peace, I send you vibrations of strength, I send you vibrations of knowledge. It works. And today enough and more documented evidence is there. So many people have documented that the soul exists scientifically and the soul departs from the body. It is not that we are existent, we are just becoming non-existent at the time of death. No, the jiva continues. And at the thought level, we all are connected. So it's a very proactive way. Once I know that this is the scenario, that the person has dropped the body, but the soul continues. So I continue to send my thoughts, my feelings, and bring back myself to balance. I also tell consciously that person that I release you from all my attachments, please move forward in your journey. Because the more I'm attached, more difficult it is for them to move on. If they themselves are completely detached, they will anyway move on. But consciously, we also learn to let go of our attachment. So we may not know the meanings of those, and we should try to find out the meanings. Those mantras which are there, they are very beautiful. And if nothing, at least you can chant this portion of the Gita, which is chapter 2 from verse number 16 to 30. Those talk about the immortality of the soul. That reminds me, and that strengthens the departed person also. And also chapter number 8. If you can chant chapter number 8, that speaks about how to exit the body consciously, and also what happens to the person when the body has been dropped. Whichever one you like or both you like, you can chant. So that way I am proactively engaging in doing something which will reduce my grief, which will strengthen that person. So for acceptance, we have seen three aspects. One aspect we saw is to anchor in karma, to believe that this effect must have had a cause and let me face it, and also to use my purushartha. For devotion, we have seen that let me hold on to the faith, let me hold on to the Lord, and may I learn to anchor more and more in the Lord and accept whatever results come as a prasad. At the level of knowledge, let me gain more and more knowledge. Let me understand that whatever happens is temporary, even this will pass away, and that in case of death, the soul does not perish. The Jivatma moves ahead. So I am still connected, and whatever I do will still influence. So in this way, we can handle whatever has already happened to us. Now the last part is how to equip ourselves with future. The solution, as we said earlier, is detachment. I must anchor myself in detachment. Whatever are my attachments, the equation that I have formed, that I plus I want, without which I feel incomplete, I should find out all those attachments. It could be at physical level, that I am attached to certain food items, a certain way of comfort, or certain things in my house, wherever. It could be physical, it could be emotional, that without certain people I feel insecure. It could be certain situations that I must be successful, or I must achieve such and such status, anything. Whatever I am attached to, I have to find out the way of becoming detached from that. Which means my psychological dependency on it I should reduce. Functional dependency is not a problem. If there is a servant in the house and you depend that the servant will be there to do some work, that's a functional dependency. But if the servant doesn't come, it upsets the plan for the day. No doubt one may feel a little disturbed, but some people get the whole day it lasts. And everybody else is paying the price of that. That's a psychological dependency. So I should identify what are my psychological dependencies and undo all of them. That even without this, I can be happy. Those equations. So if required for some time, I have to be away from that person or that thing so that I get that self-mastery. So if I am dependent on chocolate, I can be away from it for a year. At that time, don't keep counting. Only 200 days more. The objective is to gain self-mastery. So that self-mastery has to be attained. So I have to take my mind away from it and focus it on something better. So there are different ways to get detached. The whole of Gita is actually telling us about all that, how to get detached in life. So that I don't get into that state of grief. I may feel sorrow, no doubt, but I don't get into the state of grief. And lastly, very important it is that I should be willing to overcome grief. The difficulty with letting go of grief is I am not willing many times to overcome grief. Why? Because grief gets me sympathy, grief gets me attention, grief makes me feel victimized, so I feel lesser about myself. And in that, I keep wallowing in self-pity. So there are some people who constantly live in grief. Because they demand this attention. They want that. They want that somebody always be with them, or somebody always give them that extra love, extra attention, all that. So if I'm willing to get out of grief, then only I can come out. And that actually applies for everything. If I'm willing to get out of anger, then only I can get out of anger. If I'm willing to get out of fear, then I will get out of it. So I must be willing to get out of that. And second, I must not derive pleasure out of that. It's very contradictory, but it is a fact. That human mind works in very contradictory ways. That from grief also I derive pleasure. And that's why I like to be in that grief. So if I am not deriving pleasure out of it, if I am not pitying myself, if I am not feeling victimized, I am genuinely feeling that grief and I want to get out of it, then I will get out of it. There are different ways which we saw. All those ways boil down to one point, is acceptance of the situation, how it has come, what has happened. If I learn to accept, grief will go. I will overcome that grief sooner or later. So if there are any questions, we have 5 minutes, we could handle it. No, agreed. For atheism, there can be many reasons. There's just one of the definition of atheist is that, in the sense that a person who actually believes that there is a Lord but keeps cribbing and crying is as good as an atheist, because what is the use of his belief? It's in that context. There are enough devotees who will crib, cry, complain, keep on. Then what is the point in that belief? It's as good as the Lord is not there, otherwise why are we worrying? The Lord is there, there's no need to do all that. There may be a feeling of sadness, all that is agreed, but so in that context, it's actually a wake-up call for a devotee to find out whether I am a real devotee or not. So I have to first find out what are the causes of my attachment. And the cause for attachment is, one of the main causes is that I am not self-reliant. I need something to hold on to for my happiness. Whatever are the ways by which I can become self-reliant will make me independent and yet loving. There are many equations in our head that I plus this object is equal to happiness, I plus this person is equal to love, I plus this achievement is equal to success. On all those I depend. I am not self-reliant. For my happiness, I depend on so many other things, so I get attached to all those which I think are cause of my happiness. Vedanta says that happiness is your nature. The more I anchor in that knowledge that my nature is happiness, a quiet mind is a happy mind, and I consciously learn to make my mind quiet and experience that happiness within, the more detached I will be. And more loving also I will be. Continuous humiliation also causes dependency. Depression. Yeah, it does. It can, definitely. But that's why if the self-reliance is there, no, the humiliation of people will not cause me anything. The difficulty is because I have no concept of myself clear in my mind. So I'm depending on people treating me in a nice way for me to validate that I am a nice person. If you see how the great masters have lived, they have been constantly criticized, and some of them have even been, subjected to such bad treatment. But what is the difference between them and us? They are so strong and self-reliant. Forget great masters, even people in the world. Even Steve Jobs, he was thrown away from his own company. He could have gone into deep depression and all that. But the people who are strong, they have a strong sense of self, that I derive my sense of self-worth, self-respect from myself. I don't depend on anything outside. Then I don't get into that depression and all. Main cause of depression is that, or attachment is that we do not anchor in ourselves. We anchor in everything else outside. So the earlier we learn to anchor within ourselves, the faster we will be able to be strong and things don't affect. So there is a thin line, no doubt. There is a thin line between self-reliance and ego, but that person knows. Self-reliance is that I have a healthy sense of self-respect. I don't think I am indispensable, nor do I think anybody else is lesser than me. If that much I am very clear, then ego will not happen. Yes, so in that context, he said just to make us aware that all of us do have attachments. But that was not a justification actually that we will continue to live only in attachment, because the knowledge that we see in the Gita actually is that which helps a person to become detached. So possibility is there that I can be fully detached. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. Detachment is where I drop my selfish expectations and I learn to give space to people, things, and to myself also, where there is no dependency. So there is more love when there is detachment. There is more freedom when there is detachment. There is more happiness when there is detachment. Thank you very much for coming, and we will see you on 28th.